election. But recent developments in African elections have brought into sharp focus the role of observers in enhancing the credibility of polls. Public opinion is now deeply divided on this question and sometimes swayed by the outcome of specific elections. In Kenya in 2017, for instance, observers were pilloried for endorsing the outcome of an election that was annulled by the Supreme Court of that country. While in Sierra Leone, in June 2023, observers have been commended for exposing the lack of transparency and the lack of impartiality on the part of the National Election Commission of Sierra Leone. In Malawi, similarly, in 2020, the Supreme Court annulled an election that was somehow commended by international and local observer groups. Now, the risk to observers has also increased, as incumbent governments see observers as credible threats to their own election, as was seen just 2 months ago in Zimbabwe in August 2023, where several international observers were denied entry visas and local observers were harassed and arrested. But long before these events, the government of Egypt went on record for restricting international observers. And in 2010, an Egyptian official suggested that international election observers are for only new independent countries and not an established state with its own national institutions. So with these mixed results and divided public opinion on election observation, there is an emerging puzzle from Kenya in East Africa to Sierra Leone in West Africa, and from Zimbabwe in Southern Africa to Egypt in North Africa, on the role of election observers. And now the question continues: what do they contribute to the process? The puzzle, therefore, we intend to investigate and explore today are: number one, do we really need observers in elections? What role do observers play in enhancing the credibility of elections in Africa? What are the risks to international and national observers in these processes? So this panel is crucial at this time, as Liberia is organizing general and presidential elections, in which the National Election Commission has accredited 6,644 observers from domestic and international democracy promotion groups and media organizations. So how will the experiences and expertise of observer organizations assist in delivering a free and credible electoral outcome in Liberia? What lessons can we draw from recent elections held across the African continent? This panel seeks to address these questions and perhaps many more from the audience. The panel will explore the concept of election observation and the specific contribution of election observers in promoting credible and transparent elections. In exploring the above, the panelists will also shed light on how their organizations intend to support a credible and transparent electoral process in Liberia. So, ladies and gentlemen, our panelists are distinguished individuals with many years of experience in democracy promotion, peace building, mediation, and election observation. Our panelists are: one, Mr. Serik Mahmoud Carr. Mr. Carr is the acting head of Electoral Assistance Division at ECOWAS Commission. He previously served as head of mediation, as head of democracy and good governance. But before joining ECOWAS, Mr. Carr was a counselor and first secretary at the Gambia High Commission in Dakar, Senegal. He holds an MA in mediation and peace processes, MA in diplomacy and strategic studies, and BA in communication studies. Give me a hand of applause, please. Our next panelist, Ms. Antonetta Lovejoy Hamadishi, is a Zimbabwean national with over 10 years of experience in gender, elections, democracy, good governance, youth affairs, women, peace and security. She has been with ISA. ISA is the Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa. She has supported election processes in Zimbabwe and Somalia. Antonetta is currently a PhD candidate in peace, governance and development at the University of Peace. She received an MA in international relations from the Department of Social Science at Oxford Brookes University. Our third panelist is a counselor at law with over 12 years of experience working as a development practitioner, a pro-democracy and human rights activist. He is also an election expert. He has observed elections in Zimbabwe, Sierra Leone, Ghana, and Nigeria. In May 2022, Mr. Blow served as a legal analyst at the African Union pre-assessment mission to Kenya, ahead of the August 8, 2022 presidential and legislative elections in that country. He is a researcher and has led around 9 of the Afrobarometer surveys in Liberia on citizens' perception about the quality of democracy and governance. He is currently the chairperson of the Civil Society Elections Coordinating Committee in Liberia. Please give Mr. So we'll start with our first panelist, Mr. Serin Carr of ECOWAS.
Thank you very much, Brian. Good afternoon, observers, colleagues and journalists, citizens of Liberia, citizens of West Africa. I say good afternoon, everyone. Before starting, I would like to ask you a question. If you were told that you are going into a business deal which would earn you $1 million, but then after finishing your work, they say they're going to pay you only $300,000. How would you feel? I'm sure you feel bad, right? So I feel the same way in one way. Why? I was not told that this session was going to be broadcast live. It's only coming here that I understand that this session is going to be broadcast live. So this almost took my heart. Well, thank you very much for initiating this discourse, this session. It's very important. It's not always easy to understand what election observation is or what election monitoring is. We always see monitors coming in and observers coming in and out, issuing reports, but usually we don't know exactly what they do or what does it actually mean. It's very important, therefore, to have this kind of discussion so that everybody can try to understand what election observation is and what do observers contribute to the electoral process. It's very important. Let me start by saying something to our traditional African tradition. In Africa, we used to give our statements for our communications through storytelling. Storytelling is very important because it used to be part of our curriculum in teaching our children. Because once the story sinks in the mind, it doesn't go out again. You won't forget it. So, what's the story? Here we are in a village, African village, and our villages, our houses are made of thatch. It's a wooden house, usually. And we have on top of the roof 2 geckos. I believe you know what is a gecko, which are playing on top of the roof. And dog comes out and says, "You guys, why don't you stop this play? It can be harmful. Why don't you go outside and play? It may be better." They say, "What's your problem? We have our right to play. Why are you disturbing us?" "Okay, that's how you see it. Let me go and see the elderly in the house." There is a person lying on the bed, old enough, so we call it a senior person in our African setting. And Doc says, my senior, why don't you talk to these two geckos? This play they're playing up there may be harmful. The old person says, I don't see any harm in the play. It's right for them to play. Why do you want to disturb them? I want them to play. Okay, that's how you see it, fine. So Doc comes out and meets Horse. Say, Horse, please, talk to these two geckos. What they're doing may be harmful. I've asked them to come out of the plane, and senior also doesn't want to speak to them. Maybe you can reason them. Horse, what's my issue? They just play. I don't see anything harmful in play. Allow them to play. Okay, that's how you see it, fine. Doc moves out and sees calm. See, Cow, I know that you are very peaceful. You don't make trouble. Everybody respects you. Please, talk to these two geckos. Let them stop this play. It can be harmful. Cow says, it's not my business. As you say, I'm a peaceful man. I'm not involved in somebody's business. Allow them to play. So as the two geckos are playing up there, all of a sudden, one fell and brought together the other friend, and they fell into the fire that was lit in the house. Both of them died. As they fell into the fire, a brindle rose up and touched the thatch. The thatch got fire. As the thatch got fire, fell down on the bed. The old person that was lying on the bed, PWD, could not move and died in the process. Now it's Wahara, as we say in Nigeria. The old person has died. It's a senior person. The village came, villagers came, and now we have to organize a funeral. Because our most senior person has died. To organize the funeral, we have to invite our friends and relatives from Nigeria, from Sierra Leone, from Ghana, from Gambia. So what to do? They brought the cart, and the horse was attached to the cart and ran to give the message out to all these countries. When the horse came back, so exhausted, he could not stand it, because from here to Nigeria is very far. From here to Ghana, from here to Gambia, and then you do all these rounds when you come back, you're so exhausted. So the horse just fell down flat, dead. Now, people have come. We have to do the funeral. We've invited all these people to come to our village. When you do funeral, you have to cook. You have to eat. What are you going to eat? Bring cow. Cow was slaughtered. And then people feasted. And the funeral was grandiose. And everybody prayed for the repose of the soul of the dead. This is the message. What does it entail? If each of these persons, the old person, the horse, and the cow, had pleaded for Jacob to stop the play that they were playing on, would it have been a fight? No. Would there have been some person dead? No. So this is, in a nutshell, what election observation and monitoring does. It is to prevent, to make sure everybody is aware of what the process is, and to make sure that everybody contributes to make sure that the process goes smooth. So this is the wisdom behind this story. This is why in Africa we love telling stories to our children, and they will never forget. That's how we learn that prevention is better than cure. So having said this, election observation, as Ibrahim introduced very well, it has become very much, in our lives of democracy. We believe we can achieve democracy without proper electoral system, without a proper electoral process. And election observation is part of it. It is part of international best practice. We do election observation as part of international best practice. Let's remember a little bit some years ago. When ECOWAS was being established, it was established for the sake of achieving economic integration. The name says it, Economic Community of West African States. That was the origin, the goal that ECOWAS was looking at. During down the years, in the 1990s, two civil wars broke out in the region. One was in Senegal, another one was here in Liberia. And ECOWAS stepped in to quench that fire in the Sahel. And then realized that it was not only necessary or important to look for economic integration, it was also very important to promote peaceful coexistence, to make sure that in our countries we have peace. That's when they developed what is called the Ducor mechanism for conflict prevention, resolution, peacekeeping, and security in 1999. But then in 2001, another protocol was supplemented to this mechanism. When we say ECOWAS mechanism, it means the 1999 mechanism that I just mentioned. But in 2001, ECOWAS adopted what is called the Supplementary Protocol on Democracy and Good Governance. Because to achieve peace, you have to have peaceful electoral processes. The electoral process also can lead to conflict. And we want to make sure that all electoral processes are conducted peacefully so that peace can be maintained. So this supplementary protocol on democracy and good governance was adopted in 2001. And it was signed and adopted by all ECOWAS member states. There's no one member state that did not sign this one. We do understand that conducting election only does not mean that we have achieved democracy. But it is the first step. We have to organize elections to make sure that people participate. That's how we come to achieve democracy. That's the first goal that we have to do. And in adopting this supplementary protocol on democracy and good governance, it gives ECOWAS the mandate. There are specific provisions, Articles 12 and 14. If you have the supplementary protocol, you can see it. Gives ECOWAS the mandate to conduct pre-electoral aid missions, to make sure that every shortcoming, that no stone is left unturned, to make sure that the process goes according to best practice. So ECOWAS conducts several missions. For instance, in Liberia, because we are in the case of Liberia, in February, we had one mission, which was called the, I forgot the exact title that they gave, but there was a mission in February that came here to try to understand the electoral situation. What are things, what is good, what is bad, so that things can be straightened before the electoral process starts. In addition to that, in July 2023 again, the pre-electoral fact-finding mission was deployed. I was privileged to be part of that mission. What does that mission do? Is to meet with all the stakeholders, political parties, the government, NEC, civil society organizations, faith-based organizations, everyone we met, and they gave us an assessment of the electoral process as far as they understood it. What were the challenges? What were the gaps? Where do we have to close? Where do we have to interview? So this was on and submit it to the ECOWAS authorities. That employed the Electoral Observation Mission. So the Electoral Observation Mission now is deployed in 2 phases as far as ECOWAS is concerned. You have the long-term observers and the short-term observers. The long-term observers are deployed for at least 1 month before the election. So some of our colleagues, long-term observers, are here. They've been deployed here since the 10th of September, and they'll be around until after the elections. Some other colleagues of ours are already in the counties, and they are following every process. Every aspect of the electoral process is being followed. Registration, campaign, even hate speech, communication. What is information? Good information? What is misinformation? What is disinformation? Are women included? Are youths included? People living with disability? And they are giving us reports every day that we here are receiving and analyzing. Every week also they submit a report. And based on this, we prepare the arrival of what we call the short-term observers, who come few days before the electoral process. And this short-term observer, when they are coming, they come with what is called, or who is somebody who is called the head of mission. The head of mission's role is now to collect all these reports that the long-term observers have been preparing, and now again go to the stakeholders to talk to them, to tell them, look, you are still missing the gap here, you have to plug it. You have done very good here, well done. This is, you can improve it, so let's do it this way. So that is the role of the head of mission. I spoke about 2 things, observation and monitoring. Usually, observers just come and look at the process and make an assessment and so they can report. Monitors get also involved in the process, in the sense that they can come and say, no, this is what you are doing is not good. Let's do it this way. This is what you are doing, no, I think you have missed it. So that's part of the monitoring process. So ECOWAS does not only observe, ECOWAS observes and monitors. To give you an example of what ECOWAS is doing as in terms of monitoring, ECOWAS gives support to the NEC and to other stakeholders to support them. For instance, we just organize training for media, executives and media practitioners on how to promote women participating in elections rather than shutting them down. We've trained them on how to fact-check information that is being provided throughout the process rather than disseminating everything. We've trained civil society activists also on how to accompany the process. We've trained even NEC personnel on how to promote voter education. We've given them funds on how to do voter education. So these are things that ECOWAS does. And this morning, ECOWAS was inaugurating a set of experts who are being hired by ECOWAS on behalf of NEC to do what? To manage the data and to protect the data. So we have an expert on data management and an expert on cybersecurity who have been hired by ECOWAS on behalf of NEC and give them to the NEC as part of the support. So this ECOWAS does not do it alone. We did it alongside our brother or sister, the African Union. They also have hired 2 experts in the same field. So this shows that we try to strengthen the process to make sure that accountability and transparency of the process is really achieved. That's the only way the people who are voting, as the citizens, have now a trust in the process. somebody does not have trust in the process, then it's like the process goes through. So to avoid all these things, ECOWAS goes the extra mile of hiring those experts on behalf of the list. So, being told that I have only 5 minutes left, so this is what I can tell you as far as I'm concerned, what ECOWAS observation is, how does it contribute to the process of making it credible, of making it transparent, of making it, of ensuring that the NEC is accountable. So thank you very much for listening. And if there is any question, I'm available to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. So if you have any questions for Serene, we'll take them later after the other presenters have spoken. Antonetta of the Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa, ISA.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you to Ibrahim and thank you to Mr. Carr. It's a pleasure for me to be here. To meet familiar faces and comrades in the struggle. My name is Antonetta, and I just want to begin by saying that I think there is no opportune time for us to converse about international election observation or just monitoring of elections in general. Why? Because if we follow the trends of democracy, be it at the continental level or globally, I think it's a public secret that democracy is backsliding. There's much more need and concern for continuous assessment. And when you are deep into the discussion of critical electoral process, there's no way that one can do without an election observation. I'm not going to repeat what Mr. Carr has said in terms of the definition of an election observation, but I just want to mention that the main reason why we do observe elections is because of status commitment to different international human rights framework. I can cite the UNDHR, which is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I can cite ICCPR. So election observation, they do observe so that they can try at least to contribute towards safeguarding the civic and political rights. But there seems to be a trend and maybe a confusion and somehow a worry to say, wow, what do they bring all on the table? They just get in the country, they stay in nice, fancy hotels, and then they issue a statement. They cannot even force the government to do right. Maybe that's not the mandate, right? That's not the mandate, to force the government. The main reason why we do observe elections is to be able to follow and to assess whether the states are adhering to the commitments they made, be it at the international level by signing the different treaties, or maybe at the continental level by adhering, or maybe by being part to the continental treaties like the Archidec, or maybe at the sub-regional level like here in West Africa, to say how far is Liberia adhering to the commitments it made as far as the ECOWAS protocol is concerned. So I understand that there are so many frustrations, but the law is just to observe, report, and then to recommend. And that may seem as maybe a flimsy task or maybe a waste of resources, but I think there is much more, because once that assessment is done and a report is in the public and the recommendations are clear, states are bound some way to follow the recommendations. Why? Because it says a lot about the legitimacy of the government which will be coming into power. It speaks in terms of the credibility of the process, and also I think it works towards strengthening the capacity of the institutions, especially the election management body. I am going to highlight briefly in terms of some of the contributions that may be taken for granted as far as election observation is concerned. Election observer, I think they do add to the credibility of the election process. Just the feeling by the citizens of Liberia or elsewhere in the world to say there's a third set of eye watching the process, I think it gives a sense of ease to say, oh, I think there's someone watching behind the scene, especially if a situation is a bit contentious, or maybe if there is an assumption of malpractice or irregularity, we find that the role of observers plays key. I also think that observers, they play a critical role in terms of deterring malpractices and irregularities. Just by observing well in time, for example, I'm happy that as Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy, we have been on the ground since the beginning of the BVR. We have been able to monitor through the process, and I'm happy that the Electoral Commission, they managed to receive us well. We have been maintaining a cordial relationship to such an extent that where we could see maybe the weaknesses of the process, we were able to point that on time. And I think that is a fair and critical contribution to the electoral process. If weaknesses in the process can be pointed out in time and then can be related to relevant stakeholders. I also think that election observers, like what Mr. Cole has intimated, it does contribute to peaceful process, especially if there's a monitoring aspect which is linked to it, where maybe conflict triggers can be identified on time, and maybe relevant authorities like the police or maybe the immigration can be, can be informed, and then necessary action can be taken. I also believe that election observation, it does contribute towards improving the overall quality and transparency of the electoral process, and that, I think, it leads to building of public trust and also confidence in a democratic institution, to be able to say, wow, we were in Liberia, we saw it happening. We saw Liberia adhering to the commitments it made at the international level, continental, and also regional level. And also, I think it contributes to reducing destabilizing effects, for example, election violence, which I mentioned before. And lastly, I think it helps to bring the urgence of citizens. Mr. Oscar, I'm looking at you. I think it helps, especially when the citizen observers are involved in the process, because somehow it gives the way, for citizens' voices to be heard. If domestic groups are involved in the process, they have the chance, to have some impressions in terms of the process, especially in terms of the procedures. So I think there is no way, if we are committed to strengthening democratic processes, and if we believe in democracy as a system of, we cannot do away with election or observation. But I just want to demystify certain aspects which characterizes election or observation, because I think it's a highly technical procedure which calls for empirical evidence. You cannot just wake up today and say, I'm going to Liberia, I'm going to observe election, and then the following day you are issuing a statement and you are giving a position. It's a highly technical process which is hinged on empirical evidence. You need data, you need information, otherwise you set the whole country right? Exactly. So I know that so many people are not privy to what happens behind the scene, but there is a whole lot of processes, and there are different approaches to election observation. Some organizations or some groups can do what we call long-term election observation, where you find different groups of observers are deployed in the country, say for 2-3 months, and then they follow through the process. Why? Because election is not an event. And in any case, election observer group are not interested in terms of the outcome of the process. We do not care who is going to win. We are worried about the procedures, where they followed in terms of the regulations. Did NEC follow through all the process? Was the legal framework followed? Right? And was there equal participation? Was the playing field level? So once a mission deploys long-term, it takes into aspects all the different issues that forms the electoral cycle, from the voter registration, candidate nomination, and also the campaign process itself, because it's a building block. You cannot just come into country and then you want to give a full comprehensive statement about the election process, because there could be other issues that may not have gone wrong or even go well that can form part of your statement. And then we do have what we call medium-term election observers. This can be in the country, for a month, to maybe 2 months as well. And they play almost a similar role in terms of their timing and their placement in the country. And then we have the short-term observers. Usually, these ones, they come 10 days before the E-Day just to support the LTOs or to support the MTOs. But I just don't want to stop here. There is a lot of work that will be happening behind the scene. Technical experts, and these are individuals that do possess expertise in terms of the legal framework. It can be a legal analyst, and then we have a gender specialist or analyst looking in terms of gender and inclusion issues like the youth and people living with disabilities. We also have the experts that will be looking at issues to do with media, just the general media landscape, looking in terms of the plurality of the media and how balanced and informed it is in terms of its reportage. And we also have the political analysts just looking in terms of the general political context. But then it doesn't stop there. Election observers, they also go beyond in terms of producing the reports. And the standard manner is to produce a preliminary statement. This one is mainly produced 2 days after an election day, and it's not a comprehensive assessment of the whole process, but it's just to say, as far as we have seen the election process so far, this is what we have seen. And then it does not give a conclusion. Why? Because there are a lot of things that will take place. For example, the election disputes, the petitions, and then the appeals. And the statement is then followed by a comprehensive report which gives a fair assessment of the whole process from the registration to all the campaigns and everything, and also the post-election period. But I just want to also jump into quickly, because I'm being reminded that maybe I'm left with 5 minutes to say, just to give a glimpse of hope in terms of where else have observers play a role and what have they done in the past. I want to cite an example of African Union. In 2012, they did suspend Guinea to say that they are no longer part of the African Union because of the military coup. Because as you know, once you are a state and you are part to the African Union statutes, you are bound to act. And one of the statutes in terms of the African Union protocol is the unconstitutional change of government. So some people may say that, we don't see value, but I think the African Union mission in 2012, it played a key role. And again, in Mauritania in 2005 and in 2008, where there were coups, Mauritania's membership was suspended by the African Union, but it was later admitted. Same with Guinea-Bissau. And the same also happened in Madagascar in 2009. And most recently, in my motherland, in Zimbabwe, I'm sure for all the election politics that were following, you know what happened, where majority of observer missions, they said no, if the election processes were not done according to the legal framework, there were some challenges, and they pointed to issues that needed to be followed later. Some people, they may see little value in that, to say, okay, they came, they observed, and they gave a report, and then they recommended, but the government in power, so what? For me, I think they did more, because if you look in terms of the credibility of the government in power right now, it's been questioned. Why? Because of the role of observers. I don't want to speak about what happened in Sierra Leone. It's a public secret. But I believe that observers, they did play a crucial role in highlighting some of the areas of weakness that may need attention by the government going forward. So police, I just want to emphasize that as far as Liberia is concerned, I think international observers as well as citizen observers, they do have a crucial role to play. And from this audience and in the virtual audience as well, it's just maybe to support the observers, give them the audience, share with them your perspective, because as I indicated from the beginning, it's an empirical exercise. It needs data. It needs information. We need to validate. So let's just support the role of observers, because if you look into terms of the recent research, I will cite for barometer. I think there's clear evidence which points that democracy is still working as a system. But for democracy to be trusted as a political system, I think the citizens, they need to prove that it works. And I think in the assessment of the government are chosen, I think it's very important. I think, Ibrahim, I'm going to stop here and just to give a moment to the next speaker. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So as we listen to Antonetta, we received in the audience Ambassador Josephine Nkrumah, the ECOWAS permanent representative in Liberia, and Ambassador Noel Bradley, His Majesty King Charles, Ambassador to Liberia. And I'm pleased to also announce that the UK Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office is a sponsor of the Ducor Institute, particularly for this thorough analysis work that we are doing. Thank you, Ambassador. So at this stage, we'll take Mr. Oscar Blow from the Election Coordinating Committee of the Liberian Civil Society Group.
Thank you. Ambassadors, colleagues. So I represent the Elections Coordinating Committee as the largest national domestic observation group, comprising 7 CSOs. So, credible and transparent elections. I'm not sure. I don't think there is a universal definition of what constitutes transparent and credible elections. However, I wish to stress, based on our past work of observing the 2011 elections, the 2017 elections, the 2020 elections, several other by-elections, and now this one. So for us, we caught up between the concept of inside partial and outside neutral. Inside partial because we know the country, we know the actors, we know the history. So sometimes a sitting government may not like the way we will release our statements, the way we will say how we see the elections. And quite often you will hear the political parties, they will call on ECOWAS, African Union, European Union, and they tend to forget that we are on the grounds. We will be here when they leave. We will continue to engage with the electoral process even after elections. So, one aspect of, in my view, of the transparent and credible election borders on civic participation. And that means 2 levels. One is the ability for citizens to seek elected office. And the second level is about citizens voting. And for them to vote, we must have a credible voter roll. We went, unfortunately, into these elections, despite all the work we did for 2 years, and consultation across the country to effect electoral reforms with respect to the laws. We failed as a country. And we're going to this election with the same old law. And it has problems. So we have said, and we're on record, that we have confidence in the quality of the voter roll we've seen so far. However, is now on. The contention issue now is, where is the voter roll? We cannot be going to these elections 2 weeks before the polls, and we cannot access or have a copy of the final registration roll. And it's now before the Supreme Court, so I reserve my comments. Second issue is the issue of the ability for citizens to challenge the electability of individuals who seek to represent them. Unfortunately, the regulation that we now have for candidate nomination says only a voter, political party, coalition, or an alliance can challenge the electability of a candidate. We've seen a case from the hearing officer to the board of commissioners up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court affirmed the decision of the lady. We respect the opinion of the court, but we think that judgment undermines citizens' ability in terms of representative democracy. Because if I am seeking to represent you, the voters whom I seek to represent must have that right to challenge my electability, particularly when it comes to the provision of domicile and residency. We will now go into these elections on the issue of perceived political rhetoric by political parties of the first round of right wing on the one hand, and allegations and perception of potential vote rigging. Let us not hide the facts. This country has political history of vote rigging. It's deeply rooted in history. And our role then, as election observers, is to help to mitigate that public perception about the potential for vote rigging. That's why we have deployed long-term observers since the voter registration data, so that when we make our statements, they're based from it. We go into these elections with limited capacity of political parties to be able to recruit, train, and deploy party agents. It's not just enough to make allegations of potential electoral fraud and vote rigging, that the parties are under obligation to ensure that they gather the evidence as needed to be able to submit their complaints. The Supreme Court has said in 2017, the Liberty Party case versus NEC, that the NEC is under legal obligation to ensure that the elections they conduct are in keeping with laws. The same opinion said the political parties are under obligation to come before the court with evidence. And we know the political parties don't have the capacity, and they will be making fabulous allegations. And most times, those allegations are around two things: electoral irregularity and electoral fraud. We as observers need to know what these two things are with respect within our legal context. So the court has said irregularity has to do with failure to follow laid down procedures. Those are irregularities. Fraud is an attempt, an intentional action to change or alter the election results in favor of one party as against another party. So when observers make these statements about electoral fraud or political parties, they need to be clear on these terminologies. And the court has said they will not entertain any electoral petition that is not backed as solid evidence. At the same time, credible and transparent elections border around the transparency of the counting, tallying, and transmission of election results. The NEC needs to be very clear to explain to the public how these election results will be transmitted. The better we do that, the sooner we do that, the more citizens have an idea of how these results will be transmitted. We would mitigate the risk of electoral violence, and we also increase public trust in the outcome. Credible elections are also bordered on electoral justice. And that means the ability for our lay down institutions and procedures to follow the laws in terms of the adjudication of electoral petitions. I can tell you, we foresee that there will be a lot of cases, both from the Senate and from the House of Representatives, given the number of candidates that are participating in these elections. The NEC has 30 days legal requirement to adjudicate cases. If the cases are overwhelming, it will put a lot of burden on the NEC. They may not be able to adjudicate all the cases within the laid down legal time frame. We have struggled to initiate some legal reforms based on our findings from 2017. And as I said, it's still hard. That those provisions were dropped, and we were not able to make the necessary reforms in terms of electoral dispute resolution. We're going to this election with issue of electoral security. We've been told that the Joint Security Task Force has developed a national security plan. That plan will lay out how the government intends to provide security for the elections. We know we're in a very difficult time of the year. Moving election materials and how these materials will be protected is the obligation of the state. We don't know the extent to which the Joint Security has been fully funded to be able to deploy security personnel across the country to ensure that election materials are protected in a way that will not create undue influence when it comes to these materials. There are discussions for the military to support the NEC to move these materials. We have no objection to that, but we think that needs to be a process based on informed consent of the parties, so that in the event of any problem in the future, the parties can be in the know. And lastly, I'm sure I run out of time. These elections must reflect the will of the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Oscar. So we've taken 3 excellent presentations from Serene, Antoinetta, and Oscar ECOWAS, ISA, and ECC. And they've all provided their own definitions of election observation and parameters along which their organizations have been operating around the world and what they are going to do in Liberia. Oscar has given the local perspective and the delicate position the local actors find themselves in. Being passionate internally, they have interest in the process, but then they have to show outside that they are very neutral. And I think that's a difficult position, right? Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, at this stage, we want to take questions from the audience from the presentations we received from Serene, Antonetta, and Oscar. So feel free to direct your question to any of them, or feel free to just send in a general question.
Good afternoon.
So, the microphone, you can raise your hand and I will come to you in the microphone.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is I'm from the Gambia. I have a general question. Want me to stand up? Okay, sure. So I have two questions, both general questions. My first question is around is there tension between the role of electoral observers and the issue of state sovereignty? Right. So how do we manage perceptions by both citizens and states that electoral observers are instruments for interference in internal state affairs? So that's one. And the second question is around what are best practices in a scenario where there's a disconnect between the findings of electoral observers and critical state institutions, right? This process is supposed to promote stability and peace. So if there's a disconnect between what the state is saying and what electoral observers are saying, how do we manage that and ensure that peace ensues and stability is maintained?
Thank you. Do I see another hand? Two per question answer, or how do we? Okay.
Good evening. My name is Lawrence Zulu. I work for Continental. I have a question, especially for my brother from ECOWAS. And I noticed that ECOWAS has been heavily involved in contributing to the stability in the sub-region. At the same time, there are concerns around the fact that if you do your observation and your monitoring, to what extent can you state that ECOWAS will be able to, when seeing and practices, is able to use offices, since some of the adjudication from your high courts are not respected, especially in Liberia? How can you now assure us that your monitoring arm of the observation is going to be effective? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Another. Okay. So yes, after him, yeah. So okay, back to him after him.
Well, my name is Mohammed E. Kane. Based on the conclusion of Mr. Group, he said the people's will should prevail. With that statements coming from our state actors, where people are sensing potential violence and others are insinuating that there might be electoral rigging. So how the international observers are going to ensure that the people's will be prevailed if and only if the people feel that the election will be wrong.
Okay, Matthew, let the panelists respond to these questions and then we'll take another round. We want to start first. There's an interesting question here on observation and state sovereignty. Any tension?
State sovereignty. I think to the contrary. I think it doesn't not. I think it works to strengthen the legitimacy of the ECOWAS incoming government, because if the assessment comes out to say that the commitments of a particular state you have been made through the procedures, and if the assessment comes to say that the process was free, fair, peaceful, and credible to allow for equal participation, I think it works to strengthen the legitimacy of the incoming government. That's my submission. Thank you.
Thanks for the questions. These are very tricky questions. Let me first say that if you train your child, telling him that you are no good person, the child will grow up being a no good person. What I mean is, if you don't have trust in your own process, you will always see flaws in the process. So it's very important to trust first the process before making accusations. I'm not saying that everything is rosy. I'm not saying so. But you must first trust the process. Let me give an example. In 2000, in Senegal, there was a change of power. First time in Senegal, incumbent loses power. President Abdou Diouf was the incumbent president, and he lost the incoming president, what? Abdoulaye Wade. Abdoulaye Wade never trusted the process. He always said that the process was flawed, that there was going to be rigging, that he does not trust it, that he does not know. In fact, he was even instigating violence after the elections. All of a sudden, it happens that President Wade wins, and everything was fine. How can he explain that? I'm not saying that what he was assuming was not true at all, that there was no sense of true instinct. But there's a minimum of trust that you have to give to the process before you really just throw it out. This is very important. Talking about international observation and sovereignty, as far as we are concerned at ECOWAS, we don't have this issue. ECOWAS is a supranational body compared to the member states. Of course, each member state has its sovereignty. The fact that we come in to observe the election without even taking permission from the member state shows you that we have the power to come in and observe elections. We just notify the country and then we send in our observers. That supranationality is very important. And all member states have subscribed to the supranationality of ECOWAS, which is very important. So we don't have any issue as far as international observation is concerned vis-a-vis sovereignty of Liberia or sovereignty of even mighty Nigeria. We don't have that issue. When there's a disconnect between the results announced and the feeling of the populations, how do you manage it? What we do, of course, is what we call mediation. ECOWAS mediates. We cannot say that this person won or that person won. ECOWAS never gives verdict. We never give verdict. As Madam Antonetta said, we do a preliminary declaration, and this declaration is even done well before results are announced. So we don't speak about who won and who lost. But then, when issues come up, we step in and call everyone to order. We mediate. We make sure that things will come, and then we ask anybody who feels like that you have been victimized to go to court. We believe that is the best thing. And we have seen that now in some country called Nigeria, everybody plays with this word, let's go to court. Because we believe that's the best way to solve the issues. How can we ensure the efficiency of our monitoring? That is by making sure that we provide sure that they have access to every place they're supposed to be, and they have independence to verify whatever they're supposed to verify. This is the only way we can ensure that we work on ensuring efficiency of our monitoring process. Our observers are everywhere, I can see in Liberia, and they can have access to everywhere. And then we always engage with NEC, NEC. Just as I said this morning, we were with NEC. And there are so many things going behind the scenes that the public do not know. Oh, sorry, the public does not know. Engagements behind the scenes, those, background diplomacy, very, very important. So much so that today, I was so much pleased at the press conference, at the press briefing this morning, to hear NEC speak and then give out so much information, but that did not come just like that. There was so much background work that was done to bring NEC to have this press conference today. But the public will not know about this thing, and we don't even need to speak it out to the public. This is what we just have to do to make sure that the process goes on peacefully and successfully. People's will must be respected. Yes, of course. If in 2000 the people's will was respected, why can't it be respected here also when it happens? Let's just make sure that it goes according to the rule of law. As simple as that. It has to start with political parties. You must make sure that you have your party agents everywhere. Every precinct and a volunteer, you must have a representative. If you don't have your representative there to vouch for your votes, you can try for after. I think this is an example that we had in Guinea-Bissau, just in June. The opposition won against the ruling party. Why? Because they made sure that they have party agents everywhere. Everywhere there was a party agent. Some of our local observers here were in Guinea-Bissau. Madam Duf was there, Ronald was there, was there, and they witnessed it. Even in the hometown of the president's party lost. It's because people really policed their votes. So you don't police your vote, you cannot come out and cry for. It will be very difficult to defend you. So we have to start from there and then believe in the process, understand that the process can be somehow, not always 100% right. It's a human work. And as far as human work is concerned, sometimes you have some promising things here and there. But it doesn't mean that it's 100% not good. Thank you very much.
So, I think one of the challenges with observation groups is the rush to issue statements. And sometimes we rush, we say, we pass a judgment on the outcome of the electoral process. But the results are just a part of it. And I think it's important also for election observation groups to coordinate their efforts, national as well as international, regional observation groups. There are 5,890 polling places. ECC will be deploying 1,700. We cannot cover all the polling places. The polling places. So if we coordinate our efforts as both national, international, and regional observation groups, we can have a fair picture of the entire 5,890 polling places. And then, I'm not suggesting that we make joint statement because we have a different methodology. We have yours, we have ours, but it will give a clear picture of what we've seen, what we've observed so far, and that can help to restore public confidence.
Another round of questions.
Okay.
Just a minute. He wants to ask.
This one, what Oscar said. coordinate and not to rush in giving public statements after the elections. We at ECOWAS have this tradition of doing joint presentation of statements. We invite all other international observers, African Union, AISA, European Union, anyone Commonwealth that is ready to come and do the presentation on the same day, that means the same platform. Of course, each international group has its own observation system and has its own statement. But usually, most often, the conclusions are the same. So this is a tradition that we always do, and we also plan to do it again this time. So this is very important. So we don't rush in giving out the statement. What I'm saying is we don't talk about the result, because we don't know yet what the result is. But we can talk about the process. Was it how the leader did? Was it fair and fair? Was it inclusive enough? Was all aspects respected? This you can say in your statement. Thank you.
Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Martin, and I happen to be one of a board of Democratic Movement from the West African Development Agency. My question goes to the ECOWAS observers that have been here since the 10th of September. Few days ago, we noticed that we had this issue of the FRR, which is the Final Registration Board. And we witnessed on Friday, there was a huge number of people, citizens of Liberia, were there to at least to question the commission. My question here is, based on your level of mitigation, what is the level of mitigation that you've conducted since Friday to now? Because I guess the voter registration board is very pertinent to every political party, even to the citizen at large. So, what is the role that you have played since Friday to now? Today is Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So for him, I'll take it.
Thank you very much. Civil Carry Missionary, and I have two questions for the first speaker and one question for the last or third speaker. So the first speaker, question one. So in a situation where one or two political parties feel cheated or notice the fraud in an election or in this election and have supporting documents or evidences to sustain their claims, in fact, complain to ECOWAS specifically and other bodies if necessary, what would be the role of ECOWAS to ensure a credible election? 2. How does ECOWAS ensure that aspiring candidates deviate from hate and intimidating speeches? Are there any actions taken against those candidates? That's the end of the question for the first speaker. The last speaker.
Yes, summarize it, please.
As an election observer, taking into consideration the uncertainty of the final registration rule by the NEC, do you think this is a sign of credible elections? And do you think with the will of the people will prevail considering NEC's action? Thank you.
Okay, so we'll take the last person for the second round, then you will stop.
Good evening, I'm Sam Mitule, and I work for Community Healthcare Initiative. Okay, so one of my questions was already addressed by ECOWAS here there. My other question has to do with the credibility of the process. Like the statement from the opening statement from our institute here, they talk about 2007 in Kenya, observer giving wrong, saying everything is okay. But then the court come back and say it was fraud. Now we have an election, and the observer part is to observe. We know, but when you are observing, people know that if you report it factual, people will be a little bit afraid to do what they can do. We know you are against attack. But how can we as Liberians, who are maybe skeptical of the process, have ECOWAS and be confident that the president of ECOWAS will make sure that we have a free, fair election? And what we talk about irregularities and fraud. Fraud don't be considered irregularities, and then we just put someone on the table and say, okay, our duty is to observe, okay, we are going back home. Thank you.
So that's
Let's say second round, thinking will come back and not take it.
Yeah, so let's take some responses and then we'll go back to the final round. ECOWAS, your hands are full.
That is normal because we're in ECOWAS. So Liberia is ECOWAS. So that's acceptable. In terms of fraud, when there is fraud, and this thing is a claim, but make sure you have the evidence first before just claiming for fraud. If you have your evidence and you can really tender your evidence, then definitely ECOWAS will act on it and address it to the right authority where it is supposed to be addressed. That one ECOWAS has no fear about that. But what we don't want is just to make an allegation without having tangible evidence. Definitely that's not acceptable. You cannot just work based on flimsy accusations. Make sure you have your proof. If you have your proof, then something can be done, of course, by us to seek a remedy. Hate speech. But ECOWAS has been acting. I don't know, some of you who have been following some of the social media, you may see ECOWAS statement has been flagged after some utterances were made. ECOWAS cannot just stop and wait until something happens. Until it flares up. Once we saw that statement, we immediately wrote a statement condemning it. And we posted it in the social media, we posted it in the regular media. We have our media expert here, Mr. Donald Apodabatem, who is joined, a group of how many people?
300.
Around 300 persons, press unions in Liberia. So that statement was posted there. So if you want to see it, ask those who are in that platform, and they will tell you that they have seen this statement. And then we are also ready to engage with those persons who are making such statements, even on one-on-one. We are going to work on that because we don't want this thing to continue project itself leading to the elections because it can cause some trouble. We do not want that. So since we don't want that, we have to stop it as early as possible. And we are really working on that. We do not want anybody else to be making such statements because, as I said, we have come from past which we don't want to repeat again. The credibility of the process. Well, we are working towards the credibility of the process. He asked, what did we do since Friday when some people gathered up in front of the NEC asking for the FRR? What mitigation action have we taken? The mitigation actions that we have taken is what led to the next press conference this morning. I don't know whether you were at the press conference this morning, but they were there and they explained, as far as they are concerned, what is their challenges in producing this FRR. Some party representatives were there. I think I would not name any party, but some party representatives were there. And they explained to them, and they even told them, you can come and visit our data center. You visit our data center and they will tell you exactly where the process is hanging, what is keeping us not from presenting this thing. I think this, to me, I think it's fair. It's open enough. So if you are a party agent, go to NEC and try to access, they won't deny you. Make sure you have access to the data center and ask the rightful questions, and they will give you the answers. I think that's the best I can say as far as that is concerned.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that we expect the very best from our elections management body. That is cardinal because that is the essence of building our democracy. But we should also understand that we all have roles to play. And what is most efficient depends on the situation that you find yourself in. We beat ourselves too hard sometimes because we all want as close to perfection as we can get. And rightfully so, we all want the best for ourselves. But I also want us to contextualize each situation and as it arises. So if we talk about the Liberian context, we understand the new features of this particular election. We moved from an OMR to a BVR. That took time. That took getting the public to understand and appreciate what we were doing, in ensuring that that process allows for the safeguarding of the choice of the people through the voters' roll, 1-to-1. One person has one vote. And we saw the beauty of that process. 27,000 duplications were removed. That can turn an election. Am I right or wrong? It can turn an election. We should also remember that for the first time, Liberia is conducting general and presidential elections. Oftentimes, so we've done it after annual left wing, we've done elections. That is true. But on this national scale, for presidential and general, we haven't. Liberia, whilst conducting elections in the absence of annual, also is funding the core activities of elections. That is in spite of all the other challenges or competing interests within the country. So we did have funding challenges. We should also remember the context within which the elections calendar itself was. We all remember all of the brouhaha around the procurement process. Again, that delayed the whole election calendar. And behind the scenes, we were all working frantically to ensure that we resolved these issues as quickly as possible in order to allow the other processes to follow. Have we seen NEC at its optimum when it comes to communication? Some of us have said that from where we started to now, we've seen improved communication. And perhaps this is where the role of political parties and NEC working together with a single purpose or a unified purpose of ensuring a credible electoral process. NEC has often extended a hand to political parties. Come and observe. Our doors are open. Come and see this. But political parties, unfortunately, do not want to be there all the time. They would prefer to be in the public space, passing comments. That erodes public confidence in the electoral process. And so, at the beginning of this process, we encourage the parties to use the Inter-Party Consultative Committee that provides a platform for NEC to engage the parties. learn from that is that communication must improve, that parties and the elections management body must work together. Sometimes all it takes is a question directed at NEC, sitting in NEC, for you to get the right response. And it will eliminate all the perceptions that we have. It doesn't matter how many observer groups we have in Liberia, ECOWAS, EU, you name it. If the electorate themselves don't have confidence in the electoral process, whatever safeguards you put in place, the perception remains strong. And that is a real risk to our peace. And so what I want to add to this is we have milestones that we have reached, but there's a lot more to do. Oscar, you rightly said I talked about the many recommendations that were made in 2017. I think apart from the BVR, not much has been done. The referendum was attempted and that failed. So I have this whole compendium of recommendations, and I have post-its in red and in green to show which of the recommendations have been achieved. And sadly, I have many more reds than I have greens. But it doesn't mean we have come to the end of the road. Remember 2017, we were still in OMR, which still provided that element or a higher risk of voter fraud. We've moved one step beyond that. And to even ensure that where we've moved to is good, we've had an audit of the system that has passed. These are the good things that we should carry on. And as we inch every 6-year cycle, we want to see that forward movement. We will not get it all in one day. And the forward movement requires serious advocacy. Advocacy that is non-partisan. Advocacy that is perceived to be in the interest of Liberia. The CSOs have one of the most important roles to play at this point. We saw the 30% for women. We were hoping it would pass. The electoral laws didn't let it pass. Parties, after engagements with them, they said voluntarily, we won't try, we won't field 30% candidates. We thought that was a step in the right direction. What happened? Come D-Day, we didn't see the 30%. Do we give up? No. My word to Liberians is to see where we've come from and where we're going. We have serious challenges, structural and otherwise. But international partners' presence and support will never be enough unless Liberians also own the process and begin to believe in the systems and structures that your taxpayers' money pays for. Then we will be moving forward. So, going forward in 2023, I'm optimistic that we will continue to make gains on our democratic journey here. And it will not be because of what international partners have done. It will be because of what Liberians have done, are doing, and the hope they have in building the better systems for a more enhanced process when it comes to elections. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. That was a comprehensive response from ECOWAS. That's the ECOWAS Ambassador myself. So, we'll take the final round of questions. Or Oscar, you wanted to respond? Yes, okay. The final round of questions. Okay, Eddie.
So, in the interest of time, that's it.
Yeah, 3 questions.
Thank you so much. And my question goes to ECOWAS.
Again,
and the reason why all Nigerians keep asking ECOWAS because it's a concern. Not many people know that how ECOWAS Parliament, ECOWAS Commission, all we know is ECOWAS. You have the senator, who is very known at one of all the radio stations, analyzing all the political activities across the ECOWAS country. That's Senator Eddie Sumo. We have seen as member of ECOWAS, and we've seen him actively involved into campaigning. So that's alone will cause a lot of problem for ECOWAS. And I think ECOWAS need to do this as soon as possible, especially for young people. The second thing I want to clarify on some experts to work with the data center. Can you go deeper in that, please? You said that ECOWAS has some experts to work in the data center. Can you just go deeper into that discussion? What will be the TOR for that person? Okay,
we'll come to that. Let's take the final two questions.
Okay, so I think mine is just, no, before you.
You can. Okay. Thank you. My name is Caroline Ducor. I'm a freelance consultant. My question has to do with the fact-finding mission of ECOWAS in July this year, and to what extent has those recommendations been implemented, added to the concerns that Oscar has raised? Are we ready? Is the question.
Thank you. So I think a lot of Nigerians are concerned about the credibility of the elections and considering ECOWAS's role. There have been instances where ECOWAS has issued statement, accrediting certain elections, and it was later on discovered anomalies. And so, and given the fact that the sub-region is experiencing democratic reception, so these concerns are so very, very, very great. So my understanding is that elections are normally not rigged on the election day itself. There are indicators, and so one of the indicators we currently see is the thing that some of my colleagues just raised regarding the whole voter roll and everything else. So you are here, you are witnessing all of these pictures, you are witnessing deliberate attempt not to release the voter roll, the final voter roll. So all of these things are driven indicators to, an election not being credible. Are you considering all of these in your report? Or you are only concerned about the election day itself?
Thank you. Okay, finally, may I remind you all that we have two other speakers here from other organizations. We have speakers here from ISA, and we have a speaker here from the National Civil Society Coalition. So before ECOWAS takes the questions again, do you have any question for ISA or ECC?
No question for ECOWAS.
Okay, yeah, please.
Let me just throw one for ECC.
Okay.
So I don't need a mic, just very quickly. I think we everyone have similar concerns that are raised to ECOWAS. So one of the question I will ask the ECC is, now that campaigning is ongoing, are you observing or receiving reports of any sort of violence against women in politics? It will be interesting to hear what's coming from your field. Thank you.
Okay, so we start with ECC and then ECOWAS will take their load.
Okay, yeah, so this, for the first time this year, we've included many questions around violence against women during the campaign period. And we had reports from several counties around the destruction of women candidates' billboards and campaign materials. And in one or two counties, the issue of Facebook, social media, and some languages around intimidation and that kind of scale. But we've not seen any large-scale intimidation or harassment of women candidates. We've not seen that.
I'm sorry, just a follow-up to that.
Yes.
You've not seen on a large scale, but the little one you've seen, how have you addressed that?
Well, we do our weekly updates, and we put that in the updates, and we send that to the public, and put that in the public domain. We're not a state regulatory authority. So when you reach a scale of that level where there's violence and intimidation, then somebody borders around criminality. So then it borders on the Ministry of Justice we're the Minister of Justice. So now it is the obligation of the government to say, oh, based on these reports, let the Minister of Justice through the police conduct full-scale investigations. Up to now, there can be violence in District Number 9. We've called the police to conduct an impartial and objective investigation and bring the perpetrator to account. Up to now, we don't know whether if they ever did an investigation and what is that report. So the issue of violence is a criminal matter. It has to be dealt with by the Minister of Justice.
Thank you.
Okay, over to you, ECOWAS.
Thank you very much. I think at the beginning of my statement, I spoke about the story of the horse that fell dead after this marathon. I'm afraid I will not get to that point. Anyway, let's be realistic. We are all equal citizens. I am a citizen of the Gambia. Others here are citizens. He's a citizen of Ghana. She's a citizen of Senegal. The late day is a citizen of Nigeria. Our colleague is a citizen of Togo. We are all like us. We all have our right to our own perceptions, our own beliefs. When this election in the Gambia, for instance, since I'm Gambian, I don't get involved in the process. I don't even have to wait to be asked to set myself aside because of my own feelings. I may have a party to support, and nobody can deny me that. So when it comes to Senator Snow's contribution to Liberian politics, well, I feel like I have my own right to support whoever I want or whichever party I want. He also does. What we make sure is that he will not get involved in our process of observation. He is not party to it. He does have one thing to say about our observation. He's not even involved in it. As you rightly said, he's from the parliament, ECOWAS parliament, where he chairs a very important standing committee on political affairs, peace and security. That's why he has utterances on all these things that are going on in the sub-region that gives him the leverage. Well, I think he's the chair of the standing committee. When coming to Liberia as a Liberian national, he can say, I support you. He can say, I support this party. I can't deny him that. But he is not part of our observation process. This I want to emphatically say so. He is not involved in any way in the ECOWAS observation mission. This I wanted to be very clear. On the recommendations of the fact-finding mission, what has been implemented? We made sure that NEC has at least stepped up its civic and voter education. We did not stop at just making recommendations. We went to the extent of financing to make sure that it takes place. Last weekend I was in Grand Bassa, where I witnessed civic and voter education taking place by NDC under ECOWAS finance. So most of our recommendations, I'm not saying that it's been implemented 100%, but at least we are monitoring the implementation leading up to the elections. And we make sure as much as we can to make sure that these recommendations are implemented. The fact-finding mission was jointly conducted with the African Union. And I'm happy that my brother who was part of the African Union team is here. He can also tell you how much recommendations have been implemented, which they also supported. And part of implementing those recommendations brought into the hiring of these experts that we were talking about. The data management expert, because we felt like it was shocked that they needed it. It was recommended. And ECOWAS management heeded our recommendation and gave us the opportunity to hire data management expert and a cybersecurity expert. to protect. And he went through a rigorous process to hire him. He went through a very rigorous process. Maybe Madam will want to give you some more about the TORs, about those experts. About the concerns, let's be clear, we are not saying that your concerns are not legitimate. Your concerns are very much legitimate. But you also have to understand that ECOWAS does not come to validate a process. To say that you give market, or to bring down the process that you have failed. That's not our mandate. Our mandate is to support. To make sure that wherever we see that here we can give across, we can support, we do it. To make sure that it works. He's talked about some relation to some member states that ECOWAS validated. I don't think it is accurate. I will not mention any country because he did not mention any country. But I know that myself and Ibrahim have been in a particular country. And what we observed and what we reported are exactly what happened in that country. Am I right? His name is there in that report. If he says that what we say there was not right, he will have to say
You're exposing me.
Yes, I'm exposing you. So all the NGOs who came into the country, I make sure that you mention your name in the report. To make sure that you take ownership of that report. In the sense that we only report what is accurate. Now, ECOWAS functions at several levels, at least 2 levels. We have the political dimension, we have the experts dimension, the technical dimension. We at technical level did our best to state what we saw. And I would encourage you to go into what is called ECONET, ECOWAS Network of Electoral Commissions. Some reports are there, and when you read it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, when at the political level you take a decision, I can't stop them. Yes, I can't do it. But I make sure at my level, as a technical person, I do what I'm supposed to do, so that when I go to it, I can see it. Thank you very much.
Okay. Let's clap for our panelists. So, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for the questions. At this stage, we'll take closing comments from the panelists, 2 minutes each, starting with Antonetta. Yes, please.
Okay, thank you so much to Ducor, and thank you particularly to Ibrahim, and thank you to the guests. I think it has been a very lively discussion, and I think it's clear that we are here to play different roles, and of course the expectations are high on ECOWAS, but I think the mandate has been clearly explained, and I think for ECC, I think it's clear in terms of what you are expected to do. Same with us as international observers, and like what I indicated earlier on, I think we need to collaborate so that we are able to base whatever findings we have, and so that we are able to allay any fears of any malpractices or fraud or irregularities. We need to work together. Thank you so much for this platform.
So let it be clear, election observers group do not have mandates to ensure free, fair, credible, transparent elections. That is not our work. Our work is to observe and to provide an independent assessment of the process and the outcomes. So when I see a lot of Liberians asking ECOWAS, what will you do? Is placing too much expectations on ECOWAS on what they can and cannot do. So let's shift the discourse and know that we have a limited role to play. State institutions are required to ensure that any elections, including these elections, that they are perceived to be implementing their mandate in a very neutral, professional, and impartial manner. From our end, we continue to do our work, and we have vested interest in this process, but we do not have vested political interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Oscar. ECOWAS again. Closing comment.
Well, my closing comment is I have to thank you very much, Ducor, for initiating this discussion. It is very passionate. I can feel the passion, and I see the whole full part. And I thank you also, Liberians, for your concerns that you've been raising. As Mr. Oscar, let me say Oscar. Oscar said, let's not raise too much expectation as to what it was can do and what it was can do. You don't want to also meddle into country's affairs. Anyhow, there's a limit that you have to go. Although you have a supranationality, you don't have to also come and impose on that member state. There are some things that you cannot do. But we will try our best to accommodate much of your concerns, because they are also our concerns. Because if Liberia is not at peace, we also are not at peace. And we want to make sure that Liberia remains at peace. So the international experts that have been deployed tonight are working on an independent basis. They are not working on the left as staff of law. They're independent. And their assessments will be very much independent. We hire them, and they are answerable to us. They will tell us wherever we need to, act on, we will act on. Luckily, one of the NPC's members here, and he's hearing me speaking, those individuals are independent, and they work independently, because they are answerable to us. They are not answerable. So this I want to add before my comments. I thank you once more very much for coming in your large numbers, and I thank those also people who are online, although they don't have the opportunity to ask questions. I know you have asked the questions for them. So we wish all the best to Liberia. We wish all the best to ECOWAS. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Serene, Antoinette, Oscar. This has been an excellent panel, and we are grateful. And fortunately, we also have here a representative from the National Elections Commission, from the Office of the Chairperson. And we also have Mr. Samuel Afobi from the African Union, and our ambassadors who have been supporting the work that we are doing. Ambassador Bill Bradley is here, and the ECOWAS ambassador who unfortunately didn't come as a speaker, but then she had to intervene in this process. Then fortunately she clarified a lot of things for us. And so at this stage, we call on Matthew for an announcement.
Thank you so much. Again, on behalf of Ducor Institute, we want to say thank you for coming to participate in this very high-level policy dialogue. You are very informative. The young people are so very enthusiastic about asking ECOWAS questions, and some of the clarifications that were made by ECOWAS and even Councillor Blow are all very valuable clarifications. So at least we know the diversity of our role, what ECOWAS can do, and what they can now do as well. So we have another policy dialogue that's happening on the 28th. That is an online policy dialogue. It will be very